That said, I want to welcome you on behalf of the town supervisor, Mr. Bob Lizzie, the town board, all my colleagues, and welcome you tonight to what I believe a very interesting and important conversation. But you're not here to hear me, so I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. First of all, before I do that, I want each person who's comfortable to introduce themselves, so we just kind of know who's in the room and why you're here and who you're with, and we can start. Let's start from right here. He's an important man.
Jim Remus, trustee in the Village of Highland Falls.
Beth Glory.
Looking forward to visiting from Arlington, Virginia, but I grew up here.
Richie Sullivan, I'm here because you're my personal mentor.
Carol, trustee from the Village of Highland Falls.
Matt Viscaldi, Director of Citrus Services from Sarah Scripps' office.
Oh, thank you. Welcome.
Virginia Scott, councilwoman, town of Cornwall.
Melissa Everett, Executive Director, Sustainable, Hudson Valley.
Welcome, welcome. Let's start back over here.
Anthony Guy.
Kathy McCutcheon, concerned citizen.
Yes, of course, I can welcome you.
Ann Lena, community volunteer.
Welcome back.
Erica Franti.
Denise Gibney.
Right.
Sally Dorsch. Kristen Mann. Want to learn a little bit more about it?
Awesome. Welcome this evening.
Tracy Gadsbook.
Good evening. Good evening. So we start back there.
Olga Anderson, environmental committee.
Okay.
Ted Warren, Hudson Highlands Land Trust.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Carla Castillo, I have two hats, Hudson Valley Regional Council and Cornwall Conservation Advisory Council.
Yeah.
Oh, Ann Savoy. Lady Savoy.
Jane Oswald, Fort Montgomery resident.
All right. Welcome.
Nancy Sporbert, Town Board, Town of Highlands.
Merv Livesey, I got a lot of hats, but one of the big things is my home got beaten up on July 9th, and that's why I'm here.
I'll save that for last, but this lovely lady here who's important to the night is Miss Jessica, I'm not sure. Kunin. Miss Jessica Kunin is an estuary specialist. Estuary specialist for the New York Sea Grant. And anybody know what an estuary is? It's a body of water, right?
That's right.
I just learned that this morning. So. I was waiting to use that. So,
Love Google.
So she specializes in how to be resilient. I think she has some certifications in resilience, sea something. Resilient, something with the water and resilience. I'm in the resilience area. But I read your bio and it had something to do with the protection of our water or our coastal areas.
That's right,
Is
yep.
that right?
Coastal hazards, environmental health.
Yes.
Yeah, all that, yep.
Incredibly impressive bio. But without further ado, and then we got Kurt Hans going to come up next and really facilitate this whole process. If you didn't know who that is, that's our emergency management coordinator in disaster preparedness guru. Okay? So I'm one of the town councilmen on Ty King. So without further ado, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here on a Friday evening. And for Olga and Melissa for making this happen. And also to Kurt for facilitating. Did you want to start off with a few words?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're all here because if it rains, it floods, right? And July 9th last year was a 1,000-year flood, right? So a 1,000-year flood, how could that be, right? Is it biblical? No, it's our new climate, right? That's our new threat landscape. And the unique factor about extreme rainfall and extreme weather events, they're hyper-localized. A lot of them aren't widespread. So you can have a storm that's trending over Storm King Mountain, and that's the worst possible place for it to be because it's on top of a steep slope. And everybody on both sides, all sides of the steep slope, are going to be inundated by the effects of that. Just a few weeks ago, I was traveling up to Maine and driving through Waterbury, Connecticut. I experienced a flash flood in real time with my family in the car. It was terrifying. As I looked to my right, we got diverted off 84 in Waterbury. I looked to my right, we're going by Shopping Plaza, and here comes a minivan out of control, floating, and going towards the intersection. I could see the whites of the woman's eyes in her minivan. I could only imagine who she had in the car. But she went right through the intersection, across the intersection, and onto a grass median. But I had to drive the double yellow line to get through. And fortunately, we outran the storm to make the main on time. But it was scary. It was scary to have my children in the car who also experienced the July 9th flood and still have trauma from that event, just like many others have. And let's think about the long-term effects. So we have the immediate impacts of the storm, but the long-term effects when FEMA doesn't come through with individual assistance funding and there's no flood insurance because nobody's in a floodplain. We're all down from a steep slope, so there's a big gap. And who's going to foot that gap, right? It comes out of your pocket. Everybody's got a ton of extra money nowadays to rebuild a foundation or re-landscape their home or make flood repairs, right? None of that's there. So what do we do? What do we do? We look at the problem collectively. We get as many eyes on the problem as possible. We think about building resilience. And Jessica has great insight and with her expertise and her network into how to build a more resilient community, especially for flooding. There's many other threats out there we're worried about, but flooding's right here, right now. If it rains, it can flood, and we're experiencing these extreme events year after year. So hopefully some tips that we learned from Jessica will help build a more resilient community and will come out ahead during the next event. Thank you, everyone. Jessica.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. And that just helps, I want to emphasize too that I'm up in Ulster County. I'm not super familiar with the area. So I come in with this kind of high-level information, but you all have the local expertise. And also, I just want to, so I look forward to learning from you tonight. And I am going to be showing some photos of flooding, because I do that as a teaching tool, but I know that can be triggering for some people, so I just want to give that warning ahead of time and just take care of yourselves, because I know this can be an emotional topic. So I work for New York Sea Grant. We're a federal academic partnership between NOAA, Cornell, and SUNY in New York State. We're one of 34 university-based programs, and our tagline is bringing science to the shore. So we're really there to bridge research and application. So I live in the Hudson Valley, and my job is really to understand what's needed, understand the best available research, and kind of bridge that gap, and also take your needs back to researchers so they know, where to focus their efforts. So this map shows some of our offices across the state. We've got extension specialists like myself down in Long Island, New York City, and up in the Great Lakes. And then I cover the Hudson Valley region. And my focus area is resilient communities and economies. And I'll talk about resilience in a minute because I know that can be kind of a vague term. So Hudson Valley flood risk. So Kurt covered this a little bit, but want to start out by saying floods are natural. They've always occurred, and they will continue to occur. And because of our changing climate, precipitation-based floods, so rain, snow, those are increasing in frequency and intensity. New York State just came out with a climate impacts assessment report. It's also a website, so you can go there to learn more about what that means. And then also, in addition to these precipitation-based floods, sea level rise is accelerating. And then we also have man-made drivers of flooding too. So it depends on how and where we build. And we also have some aging and undersized infrastructure that causes flooding as well. The picture in the upper right was taken in a suburb in Albany, and that's just a backed up storm drain that has caused flooding out on the road. And then the lower right is some coastal flooding that occurred in Kingston in 2022. So that means flooding that came up from the ocean. So as I mentioned, resilience means a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts. But in this context, it's really the ability of a community to prepare for threats and hazards, adapt to changing conditions, and then withstand and recover quickly from these types of floods and extreme storms. That image there, FEMA just released some national resilience guidance last month, and it's actually pretty accessible, I would say. It's not too technical and dense. So that can be a great way to learn about what we're talking about when we say flood resilience. So how does a community become more resilient? These are steps taken from the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. And in talking with Olga, it sounds like this community is kind of on that first step there, assembling a team. So, you know, the process to resilience, it can take a long time. And so you want to have some community champions, some government champions, and also learn who your adaptation practitioners are in the region. So those are consultants that are working in this area, engineers, landscape architects that can contribute to your planning. And then I did a little bit of Googling before I came here, and it looks like Highlands or Highland Falls has some comprehensive planning documents, a local waterfront revitalization strategy, you're a climate smart community, so you're not starting from zero. You have these projects and planning documents that you can start from. The next steps are understanding exposure and your vulnerability and risks. So we call that a vulnerability assessment. There's a lot of different ways to do a vulnerability assessment. I'm not going to get into the details. I know this sounds really jargony and technical. But the next thing I'm going to talk about are some of the options for assisting with resilience. So this is a map. It's taken from a disaster resilient design concept manual that was put out by the EPA. And I like it because it kind of shows how you can apply certain things to different areas of a community depending on what they need. So there's this bulleted list of adaptation strategies there, and you may already be doing some of these already. So raising awareness is a huge one. I'm going to talk about My Coast New York in a little bit, and that can help raise awareness of flooding in a community. Conserving and restoring your floodplains and your green areas is also a really important thing to do, because green trees, wetlands, they help soak up and slow down water. Planning is huge, so updating building codes and zoning, having stormwater management ordinances, these are all things that are really important for preventing and mitigating flooding. And then, in addition to that, also enforcing those standards if you do pass them. Accommodating water, so you have these much larger flows coming through. So this is things like replacing culverts. In this image, there's reducing impervious surfaces. So, when there's a lot of pavement, the water can't soak into the ground. Green roofs is pictured there. You might have to elevate buildings, do some wet floodproofing, dry floodproofing in order to accommodate more water. And then relocating is always a really challenging one to talk about with our community, but it is an option. When I say defend, I mean like shorelines. So with more flooding causes more erosion. And so maybe instead of putting a hard wall in to defend a shoreline, you can do a more natural slope that can provide habitat and recreational benefits. And then there's always the option to do nothing depending on what the risk is. So I just wanted to give that list of adaptation strategies that can be applied throughout a community to get you thinking about some of the solutions that are out there. And then I know that since you're a climate smart community, a lot of these strategies help you earn points, especially under PE 6 and 7 for those of you that work in the system. And when you earn more points in climate smart communities that can lead to more grant funding that can then be applied to more of these solutions. So that was kind of a broad overview of what I mean by flood resilience. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to some of the next stuff I was going to talk about?
I just want to add, there is a sheet going around for anybody that would like a copy of the presentation or any other resources from Jessica. Just add your email address to that sheet. We'll make sure to follow up with an email.
Okay. So next I'm going to talk about two things that we can do right now to help with these kind of adaptation strategies and all this resilience planning. The first being something that you can do at the community level, which is join the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network. And then I'm going to talk about My Coast New York, which is a community science program. So the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network brings together local governments that are working on flood resilience issues. And the idea is that there's a lot of value to be gained from working with others that are doing this work, rather than just, hearing it from someone like me or someone from the state. And a network is really important because all of this flood resilience adaptation falls on local governments who are often limited in their time and capacity to take on this work. There can be high turnover in these positions, someone to carry this work through over time. And we just recognize that it's often advanced by really dedicated individuals. And so this network really is for those people. And it sounds like we have some in the room tonight, which is great. So the Flood Resilience Network started, I guess its original origins were after Hurricane Irene, Lee, and Sandy back in, was it 2011, 2012 time range. So it started with the communities that were hit really hard from that along the Hudson River. They worked closely with the DEC and the estuary program to go through that resilience process that I mentioned at the beginning of this. And they also worked together to share what their adaptation strategies were. And they found a lot of value in working with each other instead of alone. And so in 2018, they decided to expand this into a broader network to help communities that are just getting started with this work and kind of share what they've been doing. The Flood Resilience Network is funded by the Estuary Program and the Water Resources Institute, and I help facilitate it along with Emily Vale from the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, if you've worked with them before. So the network is open to any representative from municipal and county government in the watershed. We also have this other category of membership for staff from agencies, regional organizations, and private sector consulting firms. So those are those other champions that are going to help you with this work. And we have these two different levels because the network really centers municipalities and local governments and everything that we do in the network. And then everyone else is just there to help. So if Highlands and Highland Falls were to join the network, they would be put in touch with peers that are doing this work and technical expertise. And then you would start receiving monthly emails that talk about funding, education, success stories around this work. And then our favorite thing to do is have our virtual and in-person programs. So that picture at the bottom was we had a meeting in Yonkers last fall where we toured a flood mitigation project on their shoreline. And so I think we had people from 9 municipalities that came to that event. And then in the upper right, we also toured some flood mitigation projects up in Albany. This was a green infrastructure project that helped reduce the stormwater. And so you might be thinking Yonkers, Albany, these are really big cities that have a lot of resources. But one of our founding members is the village of Piermont down in Rockland County. So we do have a lot of smaller villages and towns that are part of the network as well. And that's a screenshot from a recent webinar where they were sharing about their neighbor-to-neighbor alert system for when emergencies are occurring. So these are just some of the ways that we share information through the network, through the different members. We also have working groups. So this is where network members and partners work together on specific tasks. And right now we have one on funding, how municipalities can access funding, and then also another emergency communications working group, where we're developing products to help our members, with these two major things, funding and emergency communications. And we also apply for grants to bring in technical assistance.
Jessica, what municipality is closest to us that's a member of this network? We've got Stony Point just south of us, right? And Haverstraw. And so who's close by that, we could
I do believe there's one person from Newburgh on their Conservation Advisory Council. And then in Rockland County, there is Piermont and Nyack. And we have the list on the website, which I can pull the website up in a minute, but yeah.
Do you have county level representatives from Orange County as part of this group?
No, we have none that have joined. We have worked with planner Kate Schmidt before, but I don't think she officially has joined the network.
And it's open to any county official? I'm a county legislator for the area.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So these are some of our upcoming programs. I'm going to talk about the one on the bottom first. So we got some funding from the Estuary Program to host a cohort of municipalities to go through a process led by the Pace University Land Use Law Center, where they're going to do a vulnerability assessment and also analyze local laws and policies. And so I think that your community would be a great candidate for this work. And Emily from the Watershed Alliance is running that program, so I can, send more information on that. But it'll probably happen next spring. And we have what we call Lunch and Learn. So this is a virtual presentation on October 8th that's going to talk all about this opportunity. And then we'll also have Julie Noble from the city of Kingston, who went through this process before, and she's going to tell us how the process went for them and how they were actually able to translate the vulnerability assessment into updating their codes and their policies. We'll also have another one in December. Probably it'll be about funding, and then we'll have our next in-person site visit in the spring. But we're not sure where yet. So maybe we can do something in Orange County. I was just asking about your flood mitigation projects that you have around here. So to join, you would just go to the website. It's hbfloodresiliencenetwork.org/join, and you would either fill out a member form or a partner form, depending on your role in the community. So any questions on that? I've also got some flyers up there.
Is there a cost to join?
Nope.
Is there a cost to the municipalities that are involved? Or is it, not for individual members, but if not involved wants to become an active participant, is there a cost to the municipality?
No, you just have to fill out, at least one person fill out a form, but we encourage multiple individuals from one place to join.
So I just want to clarify, so it's individuals becoming members.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. It's individuals have to join, but we call members are the municipalities that join. So it's you're joining as a representative of the municipality.
Okay.
And so when you fill out the form, we ask the question is your town board aware that you are doing this? just so that, not anyone can sign up, because it's really important to have that, everyone be on the same page about it.
So whether it's myself as one member of the town board, or it's all 4 or 5 members, as long as one person signs up, we're members.
Yes, exactly. And volunteers can join as well, official volunteers from like the Environmental Commission, Climate Smart Community. All right, so I'll just move on to the final part of the presentation, and this is something that everyone can join. So this is a program called My Coast New York. It is a phone app. You can download it from the App Store right now for free, and it's also a website. And it's for uploading photos of flooding and storm damage. So when you do that, the photos are linked to environmental data, and then it's put on a photo report on this website. And we have 2 photo reports. One's called Flood Watch for all types of flooding, and then Storm Reporter. So that's any type of weather damage like wind, water, ice, stuff like that. And even though it's called My Coast, it's used statewide and for inland communities as well. So why would we want to do this? As we already mentioned, weather and climate are changing. So kind of what we're used to, isn't really happening anymore. The models that we use for, modeling the flooding, they have limitations. They don't capture everything. A great example is flood insurance rate maps. They can become outdated quickly. They use historical data, not climate projections, and often it's the main stem of a river that's modeled, but there could be large swaths of the community that aren't modeled. And so photos can help fill in those gaps when you're starting a planning process, or if you're having, some type of flood modeling done in your community. Often the engineers and consultants will ask you for pictures anyways, because they need to validate their models and try to fill in those gaps. We also work closely with the National Weather Service, the New York office, and they use these photos in real time and to improve their forecasts and their impact-based warnings that they provide. So it's a way to gather a local data set, and it's also a great way to engage the community, because it can help raise awareness and support these resilience planning processes. So I mentioned this, that the photos, when you upload them, they're placed on a map. So this is where this photo was taken on the Wallkill River in New Paltz. And you can see that it brings in photos from the closest river gauges, and it also brings in the closest weather data. So I know that's hard to see, but there was 2 inches of rain in the past 24 hours. And so this data is not perfect, it's not the most reliable, but it can help you give you kind of a regional snapshot of what was going on, rather than just a photo. You can access the reports on a website. This is from the MyCoast website. You would go to search reports, and then you can filter by county, community, or date of the event. And you can also download the reports into Excel and bring it into GIS, which is a mapping software. So I went on to the National Water Prediction Service from NOAA. This is from the 24 hours from the July 9th event. And the black dot is Newburgh, and I've just kind of circled the area here. So we do have a few photo reports from Putnam and Dutchess County. But the event largely has not been captured in MyCoast, and that might be fine. But I just wanted to offer it as a way to tell that story, because it's not, it's captured in the news, it's on social media, but by archiving photos from this event, you can have it all in one place that is easily accessible for when you're planning in the future. And just in general, these are the photos that people have uploaded across the state to date. It's been active for over 2 years. We have over 1,300 photo reports. We have some really active users down in New York City and Long Island because they're experiencing so much coastal flooding on a regular basis. So to become a My Coast New York volunteer, you just have to visit the website or download the app, register with your name or email, and then you can start uploading photos. And so I'll end it there. I know I covered a lot of information, and there's probably lots more conversation to be had, but yeah, I just want to thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Ty. Just want to see, do we have that sign-in sheet, that email sheet, if anyone else wants to get additional information against the slide deck will be sent out as well. And thank you for being here and being so active and taking the next steps towards resilience. Getting all together in the same room, talking about these events. We learned, ironically, this week is a pretty historic week. Does anyone know what happened back in 1938 during this week? The Category 3 hurricane, Long Island Express, went right up the Hudson River. I looked at flooding on Facebook. We love Facebook, right? And it was flooding that happened on Dock Hill Road in Cornwall, where it was completely washed out. Also, 25 years ago this week, we had Tropical Storm Floyd that went through. So I can tell you my personal experience during Tropical Storm Floyd. I was a young volunteer firefighter, Hudson Fire Department, and we did 400 calls in 24 hours. I got no sleep as well as the rest of the volunteers, but I was like, oh my goodness, when is it going to stop? One of the biggest problems that we had was we lost power. And back then, 1999, not many people had backup generators. Many people had pre-existing water conditions. They had sump pumps. But I can remember walking into a home and there being water from the floor to the rafters. And it was relentless. We'd pump it out, we'd be right back up. Like, how is all this water going in this house? And it was just so inundated with that amount of rain in such a short period of time that it really wiped out a lot of people. Many people did, basement dewatering systems after that, bought generators, bought new sump pumps, but it was a valuable experience. And just to think, all the events we've had since then, they certainly become more severe and more intense. And the frequency is at a pace that we can't sustain. Like I said, if it rains, it floods. So nobody's immune to these events. What I experienced in Connecticut was so profound. I was like, imagine we had 14 inches of rain in Cornwall, Hudson, Highlands, Highland Falls. I mean, imagine we had that because it was on the same trajectory. I was watching it closely. I'm like, we're going to outrun this. No, we didn't. But it was so intense and such a short duration that it just overwhelms everything. I mean, anyone here an engineer? What's the design criteria? Yeah, what's the design criteria that we build to for all of our culverts or storm drains, right? It's not for 1,000 years, nowhere near it, right? So we have to think about different ways to become more resilient. One of the biggest problems, and this is just some historic data, going back to the Tropical Storm Floyd event, there was project scoping done on the Highland Brook, and we all know about the Highland Brook. There was scoping done to do hazard mitigation. At that time, it was the price tag was $16 million. And what it would have required is all of the property owners along the brook to sell their property to the village of Highland Falls under eminent domain, which nobody likes government, right? So all it took is one person to say no, and the project's squashed. Additionally, Highland Falls, where does it come up with $16 million? What's the annual budget for Highland Falls? Yeah, so it would be all on the taxpayer's back, right? So hazard mitigation, sure.
Actually, it was Hurricane Irene in 2011.
Yeah.
It did more damage than Floyd.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did more damage than Floyd. But I can tell you the scoping of that project at the time would have involved the Army Corps of Engineers also. It would have dredged it, it would have made it deeper, it would have stabilized the slopes to help redirect the water faster out into the Hudson. Water's going to go wherever it wants to go. I mean, you can have the best design drainage field or mitigation plan, but if it overwhelms it, it's going to go wherever it wants to go. It doesn't discriminate, right? So it's just important to think, if Highland Brook is a problem, how can we get community buy-in to do a mitigation project? How can we get the funds to offset the lack of tax base? You have a tremendous amount of non-taxable rateables here in the community. How can we get that project through to prevent flooding for future generations, to reduce the impact on everyone's homes, right? What else can we do as part of a mitigation program to reduce the impacts of flooding off of our steep slopes? We got to look at it as a community, right? There are BRICS funding, which is a state level program and it's very competitive, where that will make up the rest of the percentage that FEMA doesn't cover to cover the cost of the program. I really think Highland Falls is an ideal candidate for something of that scope, that nature, and I say of the highest urgency given what we're experiencing. And being down from a steep slope, I can't think of any other more eligible community.
So how do we get that started again?
I'm not an elected official, but I'm happy to work with any elected official to make sure we can be there with the tin can and ask you for the fair share that communities do for future events.
I mean, resurrecting that remediation of Highland Brook.
We can go back to all the engineering that was done and the scoping that was done for that project. Orange County is aware of it, and they knew about the challenge. It's a non-starter project. Why? Because of the complexity. The complexity is the private ownership of the creek. That's the complexity, because all it takes is one person. So how do you build support to take on that kind of project? Are the residents willing to let go of some of their property for the greater good? I mean, some people won't. They want absolutely no. And that's what will eliminate that project. Just one person, right? Sure.
So Highland Brook is definitely a devastating factor here in the village. Another one that we do have is 9W.
Yes.
And 9W overwhelms Lawrence Avenue. It's been doing it forever. And what happens is the state releases its water right down onto the homeowners on the backside.
Sure.
And we have tried to get them to let us, the village, actually come up with a plan to capture that water
And send it
with
over.
culverts and actually channel it through the village the proper way. They won't let us work on the property.
Well, I think Matt can tell you some of the challenges.
I was with Matt, hold on, I didn't mean to interrupt. Matt was fantastic. He brought down 6 people from the DOT. Tried to get 6 people from the DOT in one location for an onset.
And lock the door?
No, we didn't, but he was a really, really big help.
And Jimmy, we also provided them with the complete plan for the corrective action.
So you guys took on that expense, all that time, and came up with a solution, but there was no buy-in. The state was a non-starter for the state. Well, I know Region 8 is one of the most underfunded regions, but isn't 9W a federal highway, a federally funded highway? Is it not? And wouldn't I go to maybe Congressman Ryan and say, hey, can we?
State.
It is. It's called US 9W. It's a US route, but it's a state. The state has the responsibility for it.
It's in the right of way, so the state DOT maintains.
But I think there should be pressure, maximum pressure to take on projects like that.
They get federal funding as long as they're within federal guidelines.
Yeah. So it's a federally funded highway, yes.
So there's something to work on.
Yeah. It's a complex issue.
It's not going to extend to where the major problem is with 9W running off onto Burns Avenue and coming along that stretch there where the town garage is. But they are doing a project now that 3.3, is it, or 2? Or you gotta know.
I might have had some help, so I was putting the mark.
Yeah, it's the sunny part. When you just start to come down, before you get to the West Point Overlook, it's that part there where we constantly have.
Well, we're at 33, 32 right now.
Yeah, so they are working on that part of it, and that, I don't know what funding amount that came out of, but it was a special awarded project.
Well, I mean, maybe it could be elevated at the highest level for scoping because, you know, the runoff from 9W is inundating the community below.
About 2 years ago, Bob Lucy and I worked up a video, it's 7 minutes long, about Storm King. We sent it to Scoop's office and to Ryan's office and to Eakins' office because the status of Storm King Facebook page, you have all the stories on there, most of them are fairly true. But the mountain up there has a long history. They paved it about 6 years ago. The paving was great, but you have the underlying water that bleeds through and freezes, breaks it apart in no time. So I'm glad they fixed 218. I think they fixed 218 so they have an alternate route so they can actually fix the upper road because it needs to have half of it closed and have a major repair done. With this program, it looks like this is a collection of data and awareness and all that stuff. And there's some things that we can do right now. I was a fire commissioner during Superstorm Sandy, and they don't have gasoline. They were going 50 miles to try and get gasoline because all of the tankers were parked off the shoreline. Not one gas station locally has a standby generator. I think the municipality should invest in something like that so you at least have gasoline. That's something we can do right now. I don't know how it is in Cornwall, our town garage, wherever it left, we don't have gasoline up there. So they too are dependent upon that. If there's an emergency, they can't get it. These little things we should be doing now.
Yeah, we have several areas where you can fuel. Fortunately, sometimes on Route 32 in Cornwall, you know, the trees come down often.
Yeah.
And you can't even get to the highway garage. So the highway department can't get to the highway garage because there's wires down in these trees. They cut it up right away, but the wires complicate everything. So they'll go utilize the village fuel supply, the village municipal yard. But yeah, fuel is a big factor, especially for your community. And it's one of the key resilience indicators, you know, following a storm. Can we get groceries? Can we get medicine? Can we get, can we get gas? You know, the community lifelines that are essential to just getting the community going following disaster. Can't understate the importance of getting a standby generator for those types of lifelines. And it's something that, you know, can be looked at, even getting just a hookup so they can potentially have a save, or they can rent the generator to bring in and roll up and plug in. That's a much lower cost, and might be one of the low-hanging fruit that you can actually get done to get them back up and running. Again, if they're willing. They may not be willing, but we're closed. That's it.
I know that we had, I was here during Storm Sandy, we had the water literally coming over the bridge like we did in the last storm, right through town.
Yeah.
But last storm obviously was the worst storm that I think we faced here as a community undoubtedly, and as far as water goes. And we were geographically cut off from everything around us for several days until they could repair the road. Emergency services, I think it was like midnight, Sally, that finally, we had called and we couldn't get anybody, they couldn't get any roads in. They were trying to get the county swiftwater rescue team here. They couldn't get here. We tried, I was right across finally around midnight. Around, between 12 and 12:15. They were finally able to get here to help us with the shelter that we had temporarily established. So that's something that we also need to think about going forward is if we have another storm similar to this, God forbid, what are our local immediate resources here that are there for the community in the event that we can't geographic, the roads are gone yet. West Point definitely did, over, I know the fire department came in, they had swiftwater rescues going on. It was just, the emergency services, as you know, were inundated.
So at that point, however, when we had all those people come in, we were on our own.
Yes.
were on our own to not only support the people that were coming in, but also, in some instances, try and help others that were out there. When Red Cross finally came in at 12:30, between 12 and 12:30 or whatever, it took an additional hour before we were able to get the cots in. Now, mind you, we had people in the sheltering, I know that's the wrong word.
Reception center.
Thank you. From 9 o'clock that night. So for about 4 hours, we had elderly people. They were all seniors. That was one of them. I'm calling you old. But it was very uncomfortable. So we had, these people came in, they were in shock. They were out there for hours or whatever before I had gotten notification to thank you to be able to open up Sacred Heart for a place for them to go. Hopefully now we've got that rectified as to we have a place as to where they're supposed to be going in the event of an emergency. But there are things that we need for that place. For instance, there isn't a generator there, so if there's no electricity, we're still in the same boat. And there are other things that we need for that facility. Going back to it, it's being able to help these people, but whoever comes in during a disaster, to make them comfortable and to make them feel secure and safe. As we have the fire department and EMS and everybody else going out there and handling the situation. That was like the biggest part about it, is that we were on our own.
We're literally shoveling people in our personal vehicles to level.
Not only that, we were sheltering people in our boat. We broke into a thrift shop to get the clothes.
I didn't hear that, and we didn't hear that. We can bleep that out, right?
I'm part of it. Lisa's part of it. We're part of that.
They run the thrift shop, so
Okay.
it's not have a queue.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
But those are examples of situations where we need to be prepared in that area too. We need to be able to know that there is a place. We know it. We have it.
Right, so the key thing, is that we need to apply those lessons learned.
Yes.
We learned some terrible lessons then, and we can't just let those lessons just sort of, be in our memory. We have to apply them to solutions for the future, and we have to do it now.
To a plan.
Because we can't wait. I'm not being an alarmist. I think we just all know every time it rains, this community goes into PTSD.
So every time it rains, who calls you?
I get a call from Sally.
So do I.
Yep.
And people on the brook, on the top and at the bottom, checking out the brook to see as to what the levels are. So it's not as though no one is watching. We are watching. However, we need to be more vigilant, and we need to be on top of it, and a plan definitely needs to be done.
So while it's all fresh in our minds, right, we know what the impacts of a 9-inch rainfall event, a thunderstorm, has done to the community. So we need to say, all the lessons that we learned from that, how can we be better prepared at our personal level? And what can we look to do towards mitigation? How do we prevent the impacts or lessen the impacts in the future? That's where hazard mitigation funding comes into play, and different projects as a town and village will be able to look through for applying for grant funding for hazard mitigation. Again, such as the Highland Brook. So all those different activities that might be able... Storm resilience, absolutely. All those different activities that could reduce these impacts and build resilience. We have to take advantage of the federal funding that's available to us at this time, and that means getting the projects on the paper and applying for those grants and looking for a funding resource to offset the local share, being a socioeconomically disadvantaged community that's extremely vulnerable.
Wouldn't, excuse me if I'm wrong, maybe you would know the answer, having listened to what you said. Wouldn't taking away the limited green space in downtown, which is all paved and whatever, increase the risk of flooding? If you have very limited green space, you want to take that away, isn't that just going to exacerbate the problem?
It depends. The situation. Is there plans to take away green space now?
Yeah. They want to take away a park that actually sits on a very steep hill, which the water came through there and into my apartment complex, which put 40 people half cold, so to speak, even though it's July.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, that is, the basics, that more green space helps reduce flooding, but it is kind of a case-by-case basis.
And it goes back to, the local initiatives. So this network helps identify the low-hanging fruit that you can take on today through planting, diverse landscapes that, and reducing the amount of paved surfaces you have to different stormwater management techniques. So all those are different issues that you can take right now to reduce those impacts. Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question to Jess. And you mentioned that the Flood Resilience Network is at some level working on communications strategies or platforms or whatever. I think that's the kind of thing the community can test for the community.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit more about the emergency communications work that we're doing. So there's communities like Village of Petermont that flood frequently, and so they've developed this system, it's kind of like a phone tree, where when flooding is coming, there's like set communication protocols so that everyone can, be on the same page. For there it's stuff like not to park in certain areas, and just so people know how to prepare. And it sounds like there's a lot of energy around this emergency response piece. So maybe some of the low-hanging fruit is also planning for that type of thing. And the network is developing, based on how people are doing it in different places. We're trying to spread that information around. We actually have a survey going out right now to learn how other communities are doing it besides just Houston and Piermont, who are our founding members, so that you can adapt it for your community. But I do appreciate that just knowing where to go in an emergency and having those generators on hand, those are really important things that can add to your resilience too. So they might be, oh yeah,
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it might be easier to access in the short term.
So this is both for Kirk and for you. So the one program that I've always found very interesting, but I know is a little bit challenging, is FEMA's community rating system, and I wanted to see what your thoughts were on that, because that I think aligns with what Olga was saying in terms of planning for the future, the solution.
Sure. Do you want to speak to it?
Sure, yeah, the community rating system, so it's similar, it's kind of like climate smart communities, but it's more focused on actions you can take, flood mitigation actions in your communities. And so the goal of that program is you get a certain amount of points and it results in reductions to your flood insurance premiums in that community. And what I heard is that it's challenging in New York State because it takes a lot to administer the program. So each municipality there's just a lot of paperwork to do. I know some in Westchester County, I believe they're hiring someone to help municipalities administer the program, but I think that's one of the main barriers to being into it.
Absolutely, that is one of the biggest barriers. Limited resources, it's nearly a full-time job, paperwork-wise, in maintaining that initiative to administer.
So if they're, putting aside the paperwork, the program in and of itself actually does have a lot of good value, right? In terms of really good ideas. Right.
Yeah, the biggest barrier is funding, time, and we have unfunded mandates that we're requiring, governments to act at a speed that it's hard when they have 1 or 2 meetings a month to get stuff done. They need to have resolutions made to get things accomplished. It's challenging.
Is there any benefit to that program to a town like this where they don't recognize any flood zones?
I think there would be. Again, it looks at the community holistically, and that rating ties to different issues that I think.
And I would add that there are definitely some actions within that program that align with the Climate Smart Communities program. So a community can get credit, in a variety of different ways, by undertaking the the community rating systems actions, also in the New York State program. And I would think that if you wanted ideas for actions that you can take to improve your community, it's a great listing of opportunities to take. You can assess them, you can figure out what is the easiest to try to do potentially. And if there's an alignment with the Climate Smart Communities program, that's even better.
Can you send send out the website or whatever you need to really
Definitely.
look at that?
And I think Village of Piermont recently joined it. And I think we have a community in the New York City watershed that is part of it as well. And these are smaller communities, so I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you about it too.
Kurt, is this the same program that you were talking about?
I don't recall. There's many programs going on all at once, and it's competing for the brain capacity that I have right now. And a lot of acronyms. Too many acronyms.
Can we ask the question of Matt? I hate to put you on the spot, but there you are.
Okay.
There was some question about funding from the senator's office. That there's been word that there's $150,000 coming our way, but none of us are sure what that's about. Do you know more?
I guess my question for you real quick, and I can certainly give the answer. Where did that information stem from?
Somebody mentioned it at the last board meeting.
I believe that money is going away.
So I don't want to get into the details. I want to give you a quick answer. We had something planned out. The person we needed to cooperate with didn't want to pursue easements on their property, so unfortunately we're unable to pursue that grant funding from the village
Are
at
you
this time.
familiar with this, Jenny?
I'm sorry.
No, it just was asking one of the village board.
Absolutely, and that was the answer.
So it's not an option anymore.
As of right now, it's really not up to us. We have the grant funding for the village if they want to apply, but it's not up to the village either. There needs to have to be established on that person's property and able for us to pursue those two items on the project.
And just like Kurt said earlier, if one person in that corridor says no, then we're done. And unfortunately, one person said they don't want to give an easement for that work to get done, and that grant we can't get.
Well, okay, can you just explain then what that grant would have been for?
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to preface it with this. I can stand up, sure. So typically with grants, I don't like to, and our offices like to just jump in front of, here's money we're going to be giving places, because typically there's a lot of work. The village has to apply for the grant, first of all. Second of all, there's a lot of other obstacles in regards to the actual application, and people want to cooperate in this instance or not. It's not, we don't like to say, hey, here's money, it's coming your way. It's something that the village actually has to apply for. So it was, our office had the green light to have the village apply for the money. And the next step in that process was getting those easements on that person's property. And so at that stage, the person said, I don't want to pursue this anymore. What I would have addressed, to answer your other question. So we were, initially, there was a culvert there. That actually is, that actual drainage ditch is owned by DOT. But it runs underneath their right-of-way and through this person's property. And at that person's property, that pipe was severed and was spewing water when it rains, flooding this person's property, causing a lot of flooding damage. So that was one part of it. The other part of it is that there is as you probably remember that bridge by Burns Avenue? That bridge where all that water was like feet, like you couldn't even see the bridge anymore. Like July 9th, there was tons of water overflowing that bridge. The other thing we wanted to entertain was putting a type of not Jersey barrier, but like a concrete retention wall in front of the bridge, in front of that house at the corner, that would help redirect water back into the stream. So those were two items that we're looking to pursue with the village to help mitigate some of that, water damage.
All right, if you didn't have
You should
anything.
know that there is a third thing that he's pursuing for us that is going to be very beneficial. He's working very hard to try to get us a generator for the senior center to provide that cooling station that we need to do. So we're actually working on that right now. Come back to work.
Awesome.
Right.
But the rumor mill has it that some of that $150,000 was earmarked for helping individual residents, but that's not
No,
correct.
that's not the case. We
Okay, I just
cannot
want to
give-
make sure we're
And I
clear
want to
about
make it super
that.
clear, everyone in the room, like, our office cannot give, and this is where it's difficult, right? Like, this is just the rules. Like, we cannot give money to individual residents, and we don't give money, and the reason we're pursuing this project, we were under good authority from the village that it would affect a good number of residents on that stream, down the stream. So the reason we're going to pursue the project in the first place was wasn't just for the one person, it was for the entire row of houses, and there was also, I think, another property downstream that would have been affected if that project was to be pursued. Same with the generator. The generator benefits the community, so I forget how much it will be, but it's somewhere in the $50,000-$60,000 mark where I can't officially announce that. It's like, it has to be applied for.
Well, that's great news anyway.
It's already out here.
Great. Don't let it be more than that.
All I'll say is it's something that, the village is working with, Senator Scoopus in my office to apply for.
That's good.
Since it already is out, I might as well just say it.
Well, it's just good to know. It's good to know that there's progress in that regard.
So, any other questions? Any other comments? Again, Ed, we have the email sheet, so anybody who wants follow-up, we can send all those resources and get the slide deck through the email. I want to thank Jessica for coming today. I want to thank Olga for facilitating it, Councilman King. I think it was great.
Yeah, round of applause. Right, So before we all get heat stroke, I think that concludes this program. What a wonderful